Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI, the show for leaders who want real results, not more noise. Join Emmanuel Rose as he helps business builders turn AI from a confusing add-on into a practical advantage with clearer messaging, stronger trust, and smarter systems. If you felt the shift happening in real time, you're not imagining it. In the agentic pivot, Emmanuel calls it the move from experimenting with AI to building with it, so it supports your team, your brand, and your growth. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI. I'm Emmanuel Rose, and today I'm joined with Katherine Tuominen, founder of Catalyst Brand Strategy, an award-winning PR and communications agency that builds credibility for brands operating where trust matters most. Katherine blends data analytics, behavior psychology, and narrative architecture to position founders as trusted thought leaders across health, tech, wellness, and regulated industries. Her clients have been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, and Women's Health, to name a few, and she's the author of the keynote, Ethical Marketing is Not an Oxymoron. We'll focus on event activations and concrete ways to scale credible, measurable thought leadership. Katherine, thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Emmanuel. I'm excited to dive into the conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, walk me through a little bit about when you're leading new brands, what's the diagnostic you run, and what specific signals do you evaluate to decide, whether the founder is ready or how to get the founder ready for thought leadership in their industry?
One of the biggest indicators that I look for early on is their UVP, so unique value proposition for all those marketers out there. And often we work with founders who have been in the industry for decades. So they're kind of like, how do I consolidate years worth of my expertise, sometimes multiple brands, multiple things that they've explored in a clear, concise, whether it be keynote or thought leadership angle or even about page. And so what we always do is we start with more. We want as much information as we can possibly gather on them, including kind of like old brands, archived things, even potentially elements that they don't necessarily want to share, because as a good publicist, we need to know who we're working with. So once we have all the information in place, that's when we can really unpack, what is the through line that has really carried them throughout each version of their brand or history. And often what we say is, much like storytelling, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And often there is kind of like a villain or a contrast, which helps position your brand as the hero or the kind of key solution to this pain point or problem that people are experiencing. So once we have these fundamentals in place, it becomes much easier to then answer the question, what makes you unique? What makes your brand unique? And go from there.
Yeah. And are you noticing a difference in the generations of how willing people are to tell personal stories? Baby boomers compared to the Gen Zs, let's say.
That's such a great question. So I believe they're calling us Zillennials. I'm at the youngest of the millennials. So I am kind of familiar with Gen Zs, but I still consider myself to be more of a millennial, just for the listeners in case they're wondering. And we worked with, both ends of the spectrum in terms of age. And the biggest thing that I've observed is, of course, the next generation are much more mindful of what they put out. And there's almost like this cringe culture of, they don't want something that could potentially be embarrassing to be existing on the internet forever. Whereas older generations, they tend to be much more about building long-term, relationships. And sometimes that does mean sharing things that may be a little bit touchy or maybe not said the correct way, quote unquote, but they're trying to just express their message in the best way that they can. And they're, not afraid to do that in the same way that the next generation, who is very mindful of the internet's impact, may be.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. What I've found too is that kind of the boomers and the X are not as excited about sharing, their personal stories right?
Yeah.
They're way more business focused, and sometimes in this modern time that comes out really dry for brands.
Right. I love that you've mentioned that. Exactly. And what's interesting is, back when kind of content creation and influencing was at the very, very start, everyone was like, don't touch social media, don't go on it. And now I'm seeing the boomers on LinkedIn on a Sunday night posting things, liking things. And I was like, hey, hang on a second. What happened to the days when you were saying influencers are vanity or, all these kind of things that were tossed around? And I think it's this recognition that social media is very much everywhere. It's not bound by a specific age bracket. Maybe some platforms are more likely to attract a certain age bracket, but
Sure.
either way, I think, everyone's trying to adapt to this very fast moving AI world that we're now in.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, and just how in the AI avalanche of content, how the personal video of a CEO doing a Sunday night post or talking about their kid's softball game or something like that really cuts, or having bad takes and still having it be in the video, right? And having it be
Yeah.
super authentic versus the kind of like crisp neutral AI driven content.
And on that as well, the advice I typically give when someone's deciding how much to share and how to be more human and not just like a kind of stiff brand is it's always worth sharing the insights or kind of raw moment after you've already healed from it. So,
Yeah.
don't just whip out your phone when you're in the middle of a spot fire and trying to just kind of share whatever you're going through. Take a second, work through it, come out the other side and really just process what happened and what those key insights are. And then you can post from that place. Don't try and kind of post live while you're in the mess, because that's when you can create kind of long-term brand issues or perceptions that can kind of backfire.
Yeah, and I try to train people up on the hero's journey just because that is such a good trigger for us psychologically, right? And that to start when when it looked the bleakest, and then what the things were that you tried that what didn't work, and then what the positive denouement actually ended up being from that situation.
I love that. Yes, it's very timeless. And there's a book called, I think, Brand Story, and they talk about how a lot of brands have a habit of teaching or almost positioning the brand as the hero, but actually the brand is the guide and the customer or the client is the hero. So I think, kind of wrapping your head around these key concepts is essential, because at the end of the day, we're all human and we still connect with stories. We still crave storytelling and this form of entertainment, even if the platforms that we share this entertainment does shift.
I love that twist there, because I think that is the big mistake that probably 99% of companies make, is always making themselves the hero and stepping back and letting the customer or the client have the spotlight instead of the
Yes.
engineering team.
Very true. And I think, we're even seeing that in kind of like solopreneurs or brands that are building in public for the first time, like early stage startups, where they almost position themselves as kind of like the main character or the main event. But sometimes they may lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, they are meant to be positioning themselves as an aspiration for the client, if that's the direction they're having, or always doing it through the lens of, well, how is this actually going to convert, and not just kind of posting something because that's what you feel like.
Yeah, I love it. Well, talk to me a little bit about your keynote and about how you're framing this ethical marketing as a competitive advantage.
I appreciate that. Yes. So, I mean, there's so much to be said in terms of the marketing world. I think the most relevant one right now is AI and data usage. As marketers, we can do anything. We can find your home address. We can find your email address. We can message you at any time on multiple platforms. Like, there's all kinds of ways of almost walking a very gray line when it comes to compliance and what's allowed and what's junk and what's not. And so I think you have to constantly ask yourself and go back to that founder's vision or why, as to, what are the core values in place here and how far are we willing to go to still share the message, but without necessarily crossing a boundary that will negatively impact the brand perception. And it's definitely easier said than done, especially with so much now surveyed and readily accessible and easily scraped. So I do think that whenever you're making a marketing decision, you have to be very mindful of, well, what is the messaging here? And maybe adding to that, one of the things you touched on just prior to us jumping on was psychology and sales psychology. And this is one of the most clean examples because traditional sales psychology uses elements like urgency, scarcity, all of that. And sometimes you can create false scarcity. And this can also lead to backlash if that false scarcity is discovered to be false. And so then you've essentially created a trust debt with your audience, which has much more long-term ripple consequences than just being upfront as to whether it was truly a scarce product or you were just doing a quick flash in the pan sale that actually, you'll be selling again the same system next week.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've noticed in the last 3 or 4 years is that the AI driven tools are really pushing people into a transactional mentality rather than a relationship building mentality.
Absolutely. And I think it makes sense to some degree because you're able to do things at scale in ways that were previously not accessible in such a rapid speed. So instead of just emailing, a handful of people or even a few hundred or 1,000, if you're using outbound email marketing, you can just get onto Claude or whatever and connect it with your Gmail tool and then go crazy with that. I wouldn't recommend it for so many reasons, but it just means that if someone says no, you're like, oh, I can just try the next 1,000. So it creates this sense of everything's almost transactional or a quick win or on to the next thing instead of really thinking about, hey, this is a human on the other side of that who's going to read this message and what am I truly trying to communicate here?
Yeah, and then down the road, when you're acting in a transactional manner, then you're getting transactional clients, and that means that it's going to be, in my experience, more difficult to build long-term relationships, and more likely that there's going to be churn from those sales.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I've also noticed that early on where, if there's someone who was very kind of transactionally focused to begin with, they would end up being the most difficult client. And so you're kind of almost waiting for the ball to drop with them. Whereas with people who are about relationships, they understand, things happen, mistakes can get made. But if you've built this on a strong integrity and a key foundation of doing quality work to the best of your ability, there's a little bit more leeway to work through these kind of hiccups that can sometimes occur, whether it be because of you directly or because of industry changes or likewise.
Yeah, which is why I think events are such an important resurging activity for us. COVID obviously shut down so much of our sociability in business, but now we've got kind of a hunger for events. And talk to me a little bit about how you're approaching it and getting the most value out of live events.
Absolutely. So we've seen a trend across all generations that people are creating more physical spaces, these kind of key events where they get to meet people, create these real relationships and build memories that can't necessarily be manufactured in the same way in an online setting. So, there's a trend right now around like analog activities. So whether that be, pulling out a board game or coloring in or drawing for the first time, it's very much kind of what people are craving to offset the time that's obviously spent on screen. So one of the things we've seen as a PR front is word of mouth marketing is still the number one marketing channel, regardless of social media or anything else. And a great way to create word of mouth marketing at scale is to bring people together under an event around a specific theme. So that can involve reaching out to sponsors, for example, and saying, hey, we're going to have a room full of 100 women who are interested in wellness, and your brand would be a perfect fit. Let's discuss what this looks like. Or it could be reaching out to a brand ambassador or a speaker to say, we love your keynote talk on X, and we're hosting an event at Y, and we would love to feature you and expand on this topic. You'll get the following benefits. And so before you know it, you've created this very unique room full of people who are very passionate about what they do and inspired by this unique event, and then all connecting and collaborating and finding ways to contribute to making that event more meaningful. And then, of course, that ends up translating into the overall atmosphere of the event and the attendees and what's talked about after the event. Obviously, there's so many opportunities for content capture and all the rest. So it really is worthwhile. And it doesn't have to be as, I guess, pricey as people often think when they're coming up with events. It all comes down to what you negotiate and how you package that event.
Talk to me a little bit about how you creatively capture like psychographic intent and things like that around a brand or a service during one of those events?
Yes, so we spend a lot of time in the research phase, pretty much with anything that we do for this exact reason. So in terms of psychographics, the way I like to do this is I look at it was originally called like geotagging, where you get a certain neighborhood, like say, for example, like Louisiana, and then you figure out, okay, well, who are the kind of average household demographics within this region, and then you cross compare that with a psychographic tool. There's a few, most of them are paid, but there's a few kind of like free samples from those paid where you can get a clear image of, okay, this person who lives in this postcode tends to have the following psychographics. So we basically compare it with these kind of psychographic tools, and then match it with the region. And that's how we're able to compile, okay, well, this type of region or this type of group would be an ideal match for the following reasons. So that's what we do if we're doing a very deep dive. Other than that, we also, from the brand sponsorship side, we'll look at, who have they worked with previously, who are their audience, and we'll try and sometimes we'll scrape forums such as like Reddit or otherwise to see if there's certain trends that come up when that brand is mentioned. And that will help us put together a more clear profile of who exactly we're working with.
I love it. So I've got an event that's coming up in the end of July. That's like an investor and staff kind of first meeting. Like what would you suggest for me to get like maximum value from that event?
I love that. Yes. So the biggest thing is most people don't have time and they don't want something else on their plate, but they kind of like the idea of an event. So it's to remove as much resistance as you possibly can, both from people attending and for people cross-promoting that event if you want it to be kind of shared more publicly to some degree. So that could be by preempting graphics with their kind of face on it to say these are the people who will be there, or it can be by giving them a template as to here's what to share on LinkedIn, plug and play or swipe it as you will, and likewise their email list. So really just making the tools as seamless and easy for them to apply for that cross promotional purpose. And then also I like to actually have a one-to-one with every single person before, or vendor or whatever it may be, before the event, asking them what are their specific goals for that quarter and for the coming quarter, and how will this event directly support that. And everyone will tend to have a different answer. Some people might be hosting another event and they want to start filling out that, and you can say, great, we're going to help you with that at the event. Get a QR code ready to go and we'll include that at the table, or we'll include that here. So it really has to have a certain level of customization based on those specific goals, and that will of course nurture the relationships long after that one event activation.
And then do you have like a series or some like icebreaker kind of games to play in events like that, or how do you get people mingling and talking?
Yes, that's fair. So I think it really comes down to the type of event it is. I mean, you go to a marketer's event and we're all talking like it's our job. So it's less of an issue, but maybe if it was like an engineering event, it would need to be a little bit different. And obviously these are sweeping statements, but for the most part, somewhat true. With that said, I would say one of the things that I think, from going back to your event coming up at the tail end of the year, I tend to notice that most founders love to do, I forgot what the exact word is, but more like brainstorming sessions where you ask, hey, I have this particular problem. And then you go around the table and then each person sort of says, here's how I would approach it, or have you considered that? Obviously time it so it doesn't go out of hand, but it ends up being this almost like think tank where people feel intelligent because they're contributing something meaningful. They love problem solving because that's what we do anyway. And the conversations are genuinely helpful.
Oh yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, everybody loves to chime in with a solution to somebody else's problem, right?
Right, exactly. Yes.
So let's just say for a new brand or a young brand, what's kind of the checklist of PR and events that you would recommend the marketing lead take on in order to be most current and best practices right now in 2026?
That's fair. Yes. So a few things. You don't have to hire a publicist early on if you're still kind of bootstrapping or not yet ready for that. Obviously, it can add up quickly. So there are a lot of free platforms that basically allow you to to publicize yourself. One of them is Quoted, or the other one is Harrow. Help a Reporter Out. Help a Reporter Out has existed for ages. And basically the way it works, for those of you who don't know, is journalists who are in well-respected publications don't have time to find what they call a source, and they need to produce an article under these tight deadlines. So they put a call out saying, do you know a doctor who can speak to X, or a what they call it, a word on the street request, an average person who can tell me a story of the time they had a horrible neighbor, or whatever it may be. And so these get blasted out multiple times a day, usually in the morning, afternoon, and evening. And you just subscribe and you're able to kind of see the opportunities. You can also pay more to vet which opportunities would match for you. And then you can do your own kind of PR outreach to them and say, hey, I'm perfect for this, and here's why. So that's a good starting point if you're DIYing press, and you can definitely get some quotes. Usually you won't get the full page. You'll get like a quote of whatever you've contributed, but that logo can then go on your website. It can go on sales pages. It can go on your LinkedIn, and it ends up being a excellent early stage proof of concept or growth. And then, don't be afraid to follow up with that same journalist with a story or a follow-up saying, I'd love to do a, long form op-ed or longer piece about X. So that's a kind of easy, lean starting point. From the event standpoint, I would say that's a bit trickier. Some people, because obviously there's a lot of logistics at place, but a good starting point would be to look at existing events and start by attending or volunteering, or asking if they have a creator ticket version. For example, if you host a podcast, if you have a social media presence, they can sometimes feature you or give you a free ticket just for that kind of exposure of you being there and capturing some content for them. So this is a great way to get used to seeing what kind of events are happening within your industry, meet some people, network, and then start brainstorming, okay, from here, if I were to do my own event activation, what would that look like?
Love it. Those are all great ideas. Just as we're wrapping up here, what does your ideal client look like, and who are you looking to work with?
That's fair. Our ideal clients are typically between the 1 to 10 million mark in terms of revenue. They've typically existed for a number of years. They have a proven market validated product or concept, obviously, and they are very much at that stage of looking to kind of scale and become more well-known as a brand. Most of the time, the founders are learning to step away, perhaps for the first time. And so they're also, juggling the idea of, how much of their face they want to still be involved in, or how much they're going to peel back, and who else will be that kind of face of the brand, and what that looks like from a PR and branding perspective. Also, likewise, they're juggling all the current changes with AI and AEO, and they want to be listed as top 5X, because that's going to support their AEO search results. So we guide them through that process. And typically we work with founders and their brands within the health and wellness industry.
All right. Well, Katherine, that is a lot. Thank you so much for packing so much great information into such a short amount of time. If people wanted to get in touch with you, how's the best way to reach out?
Yes. So if you are a brand that matches the description, you're welcome to book a call with us. I do a complimentary call where we map out your PR plan based on your current pain points and ideal state. And then if you're earlier on, I do have a bunch of free resources, including a list of 1,000 speaking opportunities. That would be a good starting point for people who are trying to get their message out there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to review PR and the sources with Quoted and Harrow, and I really appreciate your time today on the show.
Oh, good. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Katherine. Enjoy your week.
Likewise.
Thanks for listening to Marketing in the Age of AI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Your copy of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI is available at Amazon.com or EmmanuelRose.com. You can also connect with Emmanuel on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.